So for our first talk this morning, we have Robert Jackson.
Ember.
You can see how good I can type on screen here. Oh yes, I'm sure you do. All right, so before we get started, I want to know how many in the room have used Ember before? How many have not used Ember? Just for a hint, it should be everyone else. Okay, all right, good. Sounds good. All right, so a few things about the talk. The talk is not going to be about why Ember is actually the best framework to use. It is, but that's not the talk. The talk's more about how can a Rails developer get into using Ember? What are the ergonomics? How does it work? What are the actual logistics of making it work? And a little bit about the horrors of JavaScript development. First, a little bit about myself. I'm an Ember core team member, which is why we're not going to get into a framework shootout, because it's not exactly a unbiased opinion. I do way too much open source to the point where I am forbidden from taking any new hobbies unless I give up any projects on GitHub. And I work at Twitch. Twitch is it's a great place to work. We are hiring. I'll put us on the little board out there Micah mentioned. So come ping me afterwards if you want to talk about that. Next, I want to make sure I always like to thank my family. I couldn't be here. I couldn't do the stuff that I do without them and their support. And it's a lot of work to get up and do these things, to come to these conferences. We should all be thankful for our families and the support that they give us. Next, I wanted to thank the organizers, Large Intestiner, aka Hash Rocket, sorry, and putting on the conference. I've been to, this is my third ACR. I came to the first two. I missed last year, but it's always been a great conference, put on very well. Thank you very much. And just a few points from, this is the first ACR that I went to. Andy Lindemann did a killer job live coding this talk. He basically it was incredible. You can't even, you should just watch it. Words are not working. You should watch it. It was great. And ACR is also where I met this guy. I had no idea who he was. I use his tools all the time. I didn't know who he was. We sat in the back of the room and geeked out over drones for 15 minutes, and it was great. He was a huge influence, just Jim Wyrick, sorry, for those of you that may not know. He was a huge influence on me. He taught me that you can do open source and not be jaded, and he was a great guy. Miss him. All right, Ben. I don't see him here. He may be here, but if he isn't, you should all troll him because he trolled me yesterday. So this is why he's using Vim, probably. This is my guess. It's my guess. So yeah, that's got to be it, I think. I think that's got to be it. No, but really, we can all get along. It's fine. Now I want to point something out about this. Notice that the only one that actually has the proper tools is the Emacs user, right? See that? Notice? Okay. Just figured I'd point that out. This is it's a great city. It's always a lot of fun to come back and whatnot. You should really enjoy it if you're from the area, from Florida. You have no idea. This was my driveway on Monday morning. Yeah, so pretty crazy. We had 7 inches of snow up in Providence area, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got to hop on a plane and come down to sunny Florida on Wednesday morning, so it was great. Okay, a little bit about myself. I started out in, not in web development, I started out in standard application development. I did that for a long time. Mostly in Visual Studio. I did Visual Basic, yes, I'm that guy. I also, I subsequently moved on to C# and those kind of things, which feels more respectable to most of you guys. And then right around when Rails 1 came out, a little bit before Rails 1 came out, I started poking around at Ruby and really just fell in love with the language, and it made my life so much easier. You know, just the conventions, the ergonomics, the way things are was massively better than everything that I was used to before. And then in about 2014, I got started in Ember, mostly because our Rails app had some very specific compliance requirements, actually, and we had to go to a single page app style. Based on the sort of proximity to the perspective of Rails, I picked Ember without really evaluating a ton of things at the time. There wasn't a lot of options. I guess there was like Angular and Batman.js, if you remember those. Batman, I think he's totally dead now, but I don't know. You can tell me later. So yeah, so I got into Ember about then. I've been just doing it ever since. My first few commits in Ember were all documentation, and then at the time the build tooling was all in Ruby. So I started rewriting all the build tooling like 3 times now to change the way the project built. Now, of course, it's JavaScript build pipeline. We'll talk about that stuff in a bit. So that's like a brief history of me and where I've been and what I've been doing. So let's talk for a minute about the general idea of single page apps. So the idea of a single page app, as opposed to sort of your typical server rendered app, is that it feels more like an actual application, like a thing that a user would download and install. It has a lot more state management. It has like events and like all the user interactions, as opposed to like your typical like server rendered HTML page where it's like request response, like you click a link, you hit a new request on the server, and you come back and render more HTML. These days you can use things like turbo links to make that feel snappier. It is roughly the same, but same as not doing turbo links, but it feels a little snappier if you don't want to put a bunch of like reworking into your app. The issues that you have with using something like turbo links or just jQuery to like soup things up and make things feel more interactive is that you're essentially introducing a bunch of additional state management into your app, whether you know it or not. You know, with turbo links, it's loading, it's swapping in the DOM from the next page over top, but it doesn't clear your JavaScript, right? It doesn't. If you're done anything like sort of halfway like interactive with JavaScript, all that stuff is still like around, right? You have to do a bunch of work to reset the state. And you're really kind of fooling yourself into thinking that you're not doing the state management at all. So the other issue that I've often seen is where you'll like soup up a particular page, add a bunch of jQuery, and like have a bunch of like date pickers, really nice UX, and each of those things are like sort of like just sprinkled on, and that leads to like this really nested, gnarly system that's hard to debug and manage. So this is just my experience. I'm pretty sure that I'm right though, so it's fine. So here's a few examples of like real applications. These are all Ember apps, but there's a ton more out there that are single page apps that like feel like applications. It feels like a real thing. So this PlayStation Now, this is Apple Music. It's not Ember's fault that their APIs are crazy. That's not our fault. Heroku Dashboard, Twitch, come see me later. And also Travis. You guys have probably all used at least one of these apps and are generally familiar with sort of that feel. It's also quite trivial well, it's straightforward to set up an app to be locally installable. Something like either for the desktop or for mobile, something like Cordova can really nicely wrap an Ember app. And there's some really great add-ons and tooling to set that up. Also, you can make a nice like Electron style app to install on whatever platforms on the desktop side. So there's a lot of great tooling, and I think that the experience in general is far superior to just like plain server rendered HTML. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what it feels like to develop in Rails. So this was probably like the winning factor for me when I moved from doing like crazy like ASP stuff to using Rails, was just this UX. It actually felt like someone thought about me as the developer and not just like, hey, do all these like random steps and like something will actually come out that you might be able to use maybe if you put a bunch of hours in. We've all done this, well, hopefully we've all done this at least once. If you haven't, you should. It's basically just install Rails, generate a new project, go into the project, and boot the server. And it just works. Like, that's it. You're done. Like, it works. You get this really nice, as of 5, you get this really nice, like, splash screen. It's like, yay, you've made it. You have arrived. Welcome. Join us, one of us. Oh, there's a cat in there. Nice. I didn't know that. So you keep going, you do some more stuff, you generate a controller, it like spits some stuff out. It has a nice boilerplate, it has nice default implementations. You can change your route to the welcome index route, all of that stuff. And it feels really good, right? Like it just works. And then you have this really ugly page. It's great. Okay. You can also run tests. As of Rails 5, it's all one command. Before, you've like rake and Rails, but you guys all know that. I like the fact that they've sort of consolidated things into one. Congratulations, Rails team. All right, so now, let's talk about JavaScript development. So first of all, you've seen this, this little gem. The good parts are like much smaller than the definitive guide. Yeah, this is good. This is a nice one. So these are mostly taken from a talk that Gary Bernhardt gave. As I don't know where you can watch the talk here. I don't remember where it was, but like these things are just wacky, right? Like why would null be an object? How can not a number not equal not a number? Like these things don't make any sense. Type of nan is a number. What has happened? Like what is wrong with the world? You can't compare two dates, really, because they're totally different objects and they don't equal each other. Anyways, so these are like mega like whats. They don't make sense. I will be honest, like every language has these bonkers edge cases. I just find that JavaScript has some doozies that we all love to make fun of, including me. So yeah, you should watch this talk. It's really funny. I was cracking up the other day when I was like stealing these examples. It was great. You should totally watch this. All right, so now let's talk about, like, this is a real problem that exists in node land. The dependency management sort of nightmare that we all had in, like, back in the Rails, early Rails, like the Rails 2 timeframe, something like that. I don't know the years, but you had to install all your gems. Your gems are installed globally, but then each project would like require different things, and it was like this giant pain in the butt. You'd configure your gems in your like config files, it was like a giant nightmare, right? So then these guys made bundler, and it like solves all of our problems. It was a little painful at first. It felt weird to have to call bundle exec for everything, but like you get over it, right? And now you know when you go into a project and you run a command, like you have the right dependencies, or it throws up at you and says, hey, no, go run bundle install. It's really quite awesome. Steve Klabnik talked yesterday a little bit about how cargo is roughly cargo culted from bundler. And he didn't use those words, of course. Because like we learned the ways to do a thing. Like we learned how to do it. It worked really well. And so let's just like replicate it. Like we have the knowledge, we have the tools, we can rebuild them. So like when in the same vein, you would think that in JavaScript land we should just do the same thing. Like it works great. You know every project has the right deps when you go to run it. Instead, they decided to ignore everything we've learned and yeah, go to town. It seems good. So now when you go into a node project and you npm install, you're going to get whatever the current deps are at the time. Your teammate in a week goes to npm install and they discover left pad is missing, or some other random thing. Now, I will say the left pad debacle could absolutely have happened in Ruby Gems land as well. Bad people do bad things and it screws us all, right? So that's like a thing everywhere. If you unpublish all your gems, like you're going to screw somebody if they're using it. So that's still a thing. But the point is, you can get yourself in a local state where your node modules folder isn't in sync with what the dependencies are listed in your package JSON are, or whatever, right? This is all like just a giant pain in the butt. So yeah, so there you go. Yep, a little bit more. All right. so let's talk about developing in an Ember app. Just wait for it, it'll be good. All right, so we npm install Ember CLI, which is the command line tool for building Ember apps. You create a new project, you change into the project directory, and you run the server. This feels pretty good. I recognize this, I think. You see a nice splash page, like says, hey, welcome. Gives you a few links. I think those links should be in the Rails side too. Like, here's links to the guides. I don't remember seeing those. And then you can keep doing stuff. You can generate templates. You can generate controllers, routes, whatever. You can run tests, same as in Rails. Now, this feels familiar. So this is the Rails setup, and this is the Ember setup. They look really similar, including like, all right. So this is like generating a base controller and like throwing a welcome page on the Rails side, and this is on the Ember side. Notice there's one less step. Just saying. Yeah, this is great. Like this is the environment. This is the UX that you want, right? This is like it actually feels like someone thought about the experience of me, the developer, and put stuff through. Also, we just totally copied everything that was good about everything else, so it's great. It's awesome to come later than the like sort of forerunners. Okay, so we're going to talk a little, like really short about sort of core fundamentals about Ember, and then we're going to go into actually building an Ember app with Rails together. All right, so in Ember there's other concepts, so I'm not going to talk about, but these four are like the big ones, biggies. You get the router, routes, templates, and components. So the router is responsible for taking a URL and translating it and figuring out what the hierarchy is and finding the route handlers, the thing that's supposed to handle that URL. You define your router with a DSL. It looks similar to Rails' router. It's not the same, but it's conceptually similar. Like you can have nested routes, and it's a little DSL there. So then the router boots. It finds this route. And then it goes and hits a series of like hooks on the route. Again, similar to what Rails does by default for you, right? In Ember's case, there's like the model hook, and it like goes and fetches data from the server, and there's like after model, and you can like redirect, and you can do all these kinds of things, transition to different places, or all kinds of things. So once the route executes, if it like fetches data or does all sorts of stuff, now it's going to go and find its template and like render the template. We use handlebars in Emberland, and handlebars lets you write mostly HTML with some extra syntax in there. It's conceptually similar to ERB. It doesn't look anything like it, but you can think about it like a similar concept. It's just a templating language that we use to generate to do like bindings and generate output. So in this case, I'm iterating over each item in model. Model in this case would be like an array of like rentals, I guess. I guess this is like an Airbnb sort of concept thing. I stole this from the guide site, so yeah. So then we're going to, for each iteration, we're going to invoke a component. That's this rental tile guy, and then pass in the rental that we're talking about. And so at that point, assuming there were three, now you're going to have three components rendered on a screen, and each of those components have like a JavaScript file where you can have your logic, and you can have like properties and display properties and like lifecycle hooks to know like when the thing is inserted into the DOM, do something, or when my attributes change, then update something, all those kinds of things. So in this case, like we'd have a few of them. So now you're all experts in Ember. Right? Like, you know Ember, like you could go and you should all like be committing in core right now. So what? Let's like make it happen. How does it look like to integrate Ember with Rails and like get a whole full stack running? I just want to note, this image is awesome. It really makes me happy every time I look at it. Like, okay, let's do it. It's from Star Citizen. It's awesome. All right, so the tools we're going to use are Rails, obviously. We already talked about that. Ember CLI, and Ember CLI Rails, which is a gem that tries to like bridge the gap and do a lot of the work for you to the integration work. Okay, so we're going to do a little silly demo here. This is using Rails 5 Beta 3, I think, and skip turbolinks, yes. I don't know why you would have to skip turbolinks and when you say API. Like, seems like if you have API, you shouldn't have to do that, but it's a whole other story. We can talk later. So we do this, we bundle install, now we have some stuff, right? Now we're going to go and I just added JBuilder just so I had a way to emit some JSON and add the Ember CLI Rails gem back in here, and then bundle install again. So this looks like the same. Then we go and commit everything. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so now we're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff and generate this Ember init is basically Ember CLI Rails generator to set up a default initializer to tell it that where your Ember apps live in the project directory or outside the project directory. Then we're going to install Ember CLI itself globally. This is a thing you'd only really have to do once. It's not per project. And then generate the project in the Rails directory so that it's all checked in the same Git repo. This is a really good way to set up. It actually makes deployment to Heroku very simple. You can also absolutely set it up where it's a separate repo and separate projects. Ember CLI Rails doesn't care as long as it has a relative path to where to run like the build commands and whatnot. So then we change into the front-end directive that we just created and install this Ember CLI Rails add-on. What the add-on does is it basically, so Ember CLI provides a bunch of hooks for various packages to plug into and have code executed at various times during the life cycle. So in this case, I believe the main hooks that it's implementing is like kicking off a build, detecting when a build is running to make sure that you can't do requests to the Rails server during the build. Like obviously you'd get stale assets if you did that. Basically to just block the server. And then also if you have an error, if your Ember CLI app can't build and you get an error, then you would see a nice error message page with like telling you what the error from the Rails side was. So now we're going to do all the stuff. It does exactly what you think it would do, except for this npm install part takes forever because hotel Wi-Fi. Yeah, so I should have been talking about that when this was playing. Yeah, so there you go. So it's installing the Ember CLI command, the binary command globally. You don't technically have to do this. You can, if you do to generate a project, but subsequently it will use the binary locally installed in the front end folder for all this stuff. So now it's going to build the actual app and skip Git. By default, Ember CLI, when you build a new app, will automatically do an initial commit for you because it's helpful like that. But in this context, we were already in a Git directory, so we didn't want to have a separate Git repo. All right, so more npm stuff. I think I sped this up, hopefully. Nice little spinner, though. Can't see that. Oh, it's gone. Damn it. All right, so then we go into the directory and add the add-on. Note we're using Ember install instead of npm install. This is because when you install add-ons with Ember CLI, there's a few hooks that we call on the add-on. So we install it, we use npm internally, and then when we install it, we will execute some hooks. So the add-on has the ability to add more blueprints to your project, like automatically generate some files for you upon installation, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so one tiny quirk with the demo that I discovered last night when I was feverishly working on this. Basically, with Rails 5, the Ember CLI Rails has a slight issue because by default, when you generate an API-only app, it doesn't extend action controller base for the application controller. So there's some methods that Ember CLI Rails expects to be present that aren't there. There's an open PR here to fix this. It's actively in the works. So anyways, just a quick fix is to change action controller change application controller to use action controller base. There's a slight additional troll using Emacs here. Seems good. Yeah, that was dumb. All right, so now here's where you really get into things. So you mount the Ember app into your routes file in Rails, and now it basically says, okay, the Ember app's named frontend. In the initializer, you have frontend. You can have many Ember CLI apps hosted in the same Rails app. It works really nicely. And we're saying, okay, mount it as slash, so like the root of the page, basically. So essentially what this is going to do is in development, it's going to start the Ember CLI server behind the scenes when you boot Rails S, and then you do a request to slash in this case, or to the URL. It will boot Ember CLI to do a build, and then just proxy the assets. Essentially, everything under front end will be, everything under slash will be proxied to front end. And then it'll serve the assets, it'll serve CSS or JavaScript, everything from the Ember CLI app. This means that you can build your Ember CLI apps, and they can just be sort of normal Ember CLI apps. You can use add-ons, you can use all of the sort of standard tooling that we've worked to build up, and then embed it directly in your Rails app. There's other mechanisms where you can include just JavaScript includes in a view in Rails, but this is much easier. If you do that mechanism, then you also have to worry about CSS and double including things that are already included by Rails, like jQuery and whatnot. So this is just a really nice setup, and I think it took a bit of iteration to get to land on this sort of interface. Yeah, seems good. Yada yada. All right, so now we're going to start the server, and you're going to see like normal Rails boot. It doesn't do anything. I go and refresh the browser to the page, and you're going to see that it boots and builds the Ember CLI app, and you'll see Ember CLI's build output on the left side. It takes a moment because it's starting a process to do the build. The build, as you can see here, it took just over a second, and then the Ember app booted. There's no display because we don't have a template. We haven't added any actual output yet. But you can kind of get the idea that once this is done, once the scaffolding is done is put in place, your development workflow is basically the same as what it is with a normal Rails app. You just call Rails S. You can run bin Rails test. You can run Ember tests from the front end folder, and it's really great. So now I'm going to add a thing so we don't have a giant white screen. Paste. And then refresh the page. You'll see I switch back to the server so you can see it rebuild. Notice it did a rebuild. It took 186 milliseconds to rebuild the app. And then we refresh and like boom, Ember app updates. There's a few things that I noticed while doing this, and I added some issues, so we'll continue iterating and making this better. But it's like really well integrated with the Rails process. I really enjoy this. There's been, like I said, there's been a number of iterations here where we started where it was just hosting the assets, the actual Ember assets. We also then had a thing where we would do the ES6 compilation of the assets in Rails, but use Node to do it in Rails, and it was like weird. So we did that. And sort of like, so this is like a long iterative process where we've come to finally rely on the rest of the ecosystem's tools in the Ember ecosystem. And it's actually quite nice. All right, so that was a really silly demo. But you can kind of get an idea of what it's like to use Rails and Ember together. And it's not as painful as you might think, which is great. So what's next? We didn't talk about testing. I'm going to just zip through a few things about testing. This is a site that was put together for the Ancient City Ruby, live.ancientcityruby.com. It's great. It's like, this is where like hashtag ACR16 has been going. This site is built via Ember CLI Rails, and it uses Ember. This is an Ember app, and it's communicating back and forth with the API, and it's nice. So because of the way these two things are integrated, you can now easily run like tests, like your Cucumber tests. You can actually hit the API. You can actually boot the server and boot your browser and run real end-to-end acceptance tests. With a normal Ember CLI app, you can run acceptance tests, but it doesn't necessarily tie into your backend because your backend is a separate process. It's a whole different thing. This is actually a really nice feature, and this is a thing that I think most people designing single-page apps often forget, that like last-mile integration testing effort. Yeah, so so oftentimes you'll have an acceptance test to like click through the URL structure and have fixtures or mocks that can easily get out of sync from your actual API, and then what do? You don't know it's down until you deploy and it's broken, which is bad. So this setup gives you the ability to easily run real tests end-to-end on the whole thing. And then you can also write Ember-style acceptance tests, which boot the full Ember app, visit a URL, and then you can do assertions. You can click around in the page. You can confirm that some interaction happens, transitions happen, all that kind of stuff. It's quite nice. But you can use the things together, right? So you can do the JavaScript land testing, the default Ember app testing in the Ember app, and it runs very fast. And then you can do sort of acceptance, like full level, like black box style testing with Cucumber or RSpec, Capybara, whatever, in the Rails side, and everything kind of just works. It's really nice. All right, so I basically didn't teach you anything other than show you that it isn't horrible as you probably thought it was. So let's talk a little bit about where you can go and learn more things. So the main websites here are, these are the guides for Ember. We've been putting a ton of work into the guides, and I would love for you all to just read through them, go through them, like open issues for things that don't make sense. We're really trying to beef these up and make them actually like a much more immersive learning experience. The API docs also are good. We work pretty hard on the inline docs, but if you notice anything, please call them out. We love those sort of like fresh eyes looking at problems to say, hey, wait, this makes no sense. If you didn't already know what this was doing, you would not know. So we love that. So these sites are really great. The API the guides are versioned. So as a new Ember version comes out, which should happen like Monday, you can go and see version 2.5.0. There's a couple of podcasts that are really good. They try to keep you up to date. Ember.land, and Ember Weekend. Ember Weekend is hosted by some of the large intestiner people. So it's pretty good. Emberland is obviously better because it's my podcast, but it's fine. And then there's some really nice, there's a whole bunch of open source projects that are using Ember that you can like actually go and look at the code, see how they did it. Both of these are probably things that you either have heard of or have used before. And they're both using like a standard Ember CLI setup. In Ghost's case, they actually have a node server side, not like a Ruby server, but they have a node server, and the front end is nested in the same directory, similar to the structure that we talked about. And in Travis' side, it's just web. It's just an Ember CLI app, and it's very conventional. It's straightforward. They did a ton of work to like migrate from like an older Ember CLI structure over into an Ember CLI app, and it's really great. These are great resources to look at. And jump in and look at things. So now you guys are all experts. You can go do things, and onwards and upwards.